Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week is another in the series of Wallsend Tales from the Past, and this is video number 12. As always, the stories all come from different years and are not in any particular order, and some stories may be longer than others, and the stories may be about people, buildings, or just general everyday things that happened in Wallsend in the past. I hope you will enjoy it and find it interesting. In 1888, an article appeared in the local papers discussing the idea of a temperance cafe in Jarrow, and it was said that they never worked, so it was not worth opening one. This prompted a Wallsend resident to write to the papers about the very successful Wallsend Temperance Cafe, the story of which I have covered fully in another video. The author of the letter wrote under the initials GBH, so I think we can all guess that that would have been George Burton Hunter. Mr. Hunter said the Wallsend Cafe was doing very well since it had first opened 4 years previously, and he said that the people of Wallsend used it on a regular basis. He said the cafe had no rules other than swearing, spitting and gambling were not allowed, and their evening science and art classes were attended by around 300 students and had been so successful that there was nothing to compare them with apart from in much larger towns. The cafe part was often busy with people drinking coffee and reading papers, and he felt it was a welcome change from spending their time in the local public houses. He said the only thing the cafe had failed on was it had not yet made a profit, but it had not been built with profit in mind. It was built for the use of the people of Wallsend, and although they had not yet made money, they had lost very little. He finished his letter by saying that he felt if Jarrow were to build a cafe and run it as well as the Wallsend one, then he saw no reason why it too could not be a great success, and was most definitely worth opening for the benefit of the people of that town. In 1894, a huge windstorm caused a lot of damage in Wallsend. It was reported that a roof was blown off a house in Thames Street and the co-op was damaged when 2 of the chimneys were blown down and fell through the roof. A house in Long Row, better known today as Carville Road, had a window completely blown in, the frame included, but not one pane of glass was broken, which must have still been quite scary for the people inside at the time, but probably easier to repair as it could just be fastened back in place. More damage was caused at the Masonic Hall when one of the windows was broken, and it doesn't sound like it was one of the stained glass windows, but they didn't actually say which window it was. It was said to be so bad between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. that many people of Wallsend were unable to sleep, and a lot were apparently trying to make their homes windproof. Many of the local shopkeepers had gone to their shops to board up windows to try and protect them from the wind, and the high street must have looked quite strange with boarded up windows, as this was a time long before shutters. And it truly must have been a very bad storm, as the men of the shipyards were unable to go to work until it stopped, and there was usually very little that would stop the shipyards from working. One good thing about the storm is that there were no reports of anyone being injured, but it does sound like it was a very scary night and morning. In 1899, it was recommended that the water company should place fire hydrants all along the high street between Davison's farm, which was just beside Richardson Day's school, and West Street. It was hoped these would be of benefit to the fire brigade of Wallsend, and there would be 5 between Station Road and West Street, 2 between Park Road, still known as Renfrew Road at the time, and the Coach and Horses, and 1 between the Coach and Horses and the farm. Obviously, the areas with less fire hydrants were the less populated areas, as the town at the time was more built up between Station Road and West Street. The fire hydrants were also another sign of the changing times of Wallsend. Gone were the days when fires would have to be put out with buckets of water. And I have to say though that I have looked at loads of old photos of Wallsend High Street and never spotted a single one. So I hope they were a lot easier to find when they were actually needed. July of 1880 was the Sunday School centenary, and the children of various Wallsend Sunday schools took part in a huge parade. The weather on the day was not very good. It rained most of the time, but this did not put anyone off. Around 720 children and 107 teachers took part. The parade started at the Co-op store where the children sang their first hymn. It then headed along the High Street, turning into Station Road, which at the time was still known as Swan Street, stopping twice here to sing more hymns before heading to the Green where they sang even more hymns. The parade returned via North Road, down West Street and back onto the High Street, stopping several more times for the children to sing before arriving back at the Co-op, where the children were served tea in the hall. The paper said the hall was far too small for such a gathering, but the staff worked hard to be sure that everyone was served quickly, and their parents were then served tea after the children had all left. The children had then headed off to the cricket field to play games. Luckily by this time the rain had stopped, and they were later joined by family members who also joined in with the children's games. But sadly, at 6 p.m. the rain began again, and this time it was very heavy rain, so the children all gathered together to sing one last hymn and give 3 cheers in thanks for the use of the field before they all headed home. In 1885, 2 men were caught stealing boots on Wallsend High Street. Sergeant Hopper was walking down the street on a Saturday night when he noticed 2 men behaving in a suspicious manner, so he decided to watch what they did. One man stood in the doorway of Mr. Alderson's boot and shoe shop, and the other stood behind him and cut down 2 pair of boots that were hanging outside the shop. On seeing this, Sergeant Hopper immediately made himself known, and the men dropped the boots, but it was too late and they were both arrested. They left quietly at first, but on reaching the police station, which at the time would have been on the corner of the avenue and the High Street, they decided they would try and make a run for it. But luckily PC Sinton was just coming along the road at the time, and he was able to help Sergeant Hopper keep hold of the men. The boots were said to be worth just over 3 shillings. The 2 men were later sent to the magistrates' court, where one man, Patrick, admitted to the crime, but the other, James, said nothing. And it did not make much difference in the end, as both men were sent to prison for 1 month. In 1879, a much lesser crime was committed by a man who we will simply call Ralph, who was a labourer from Wallsend. He had gone into a shop on Wallsend High Street where a young girl by the name of Susan Grady was inside buying some items. Ralph, who did not know the girl, asked her to give him 2 shillings for some beer, and when she refused, saying that the money she had was not hers, he took the money from her. Ralph was quickly caught and also sent before the magistrates, and because of his previous convictions, he was found guilty of the charge and sent to prison for 7 years. Now I have to admit to thinking this was rather a long time for just 2 shillings, but it seems he was on what we would now call a suspended sentence, and I guess the magistrates were also hoping they would put an end to his life of crime. I did do a little search about Ralph, but wasn't able to find any details for him after this, so I don't know if his long prison sentence did the trick. The last story for this week comes from 1886, when a letter appeared in the local papers from a Mr. Thomas Green, who was a builder who lived in Wallsend. He stated that the previous week an article had been printed stating, "Thomas Green, drunk and disorderly at Wallsend." He said he did not know of any other Thomas Greens who lived in Wallsend but himself, and this man was not him. He asked that the next paper could be printed stating that the drunken disorderly man was not Mr. Thomas Green, the builder, who lived at North Road. He felt the previous article, if not corrected, could damage his character and also his business. I didn't find any other articles in the paper about this, but as they had printed his letter, I am sure they will have thought that that would have been enough to put the matter right. And it is worth noting, though, that Thomas Green was definitely not the only one in Wallsend, as there was at least one other man of the same name, who was maybe not quite as good a character as the one who wrote the complaint letter. I do hope that you have enjoyed these short little stories about Wallsend in the past, and I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.